As a reminder for open first Shabbat, we're going to say a little bit before we really dive into it. It's really good to see all of you. I don't know, so it started raining a lot yet? Okay. Last year, as you all saw, I ran out right before he was shy for his little league baseball game. He's, of course, in his uniform, and then honestly, one inning he did his game. Told me we're not going to have the game today because it says it's going to rain all day. But no.
There's a fun fact, because I worked for someone whose side job is a scorer for Major League Baseball, and when they cancel a game due to rain, they call it banging it.
Call it what?
Bang. They bang the game.
Banging
it.
Huh.
I don't know where that comes from.
Hmm.
You can amaze your friends.
Interesting.
That'll be a final job.
Well,
Unless you're the Mets.
100%.
unless you're the Mets.
And they'll wait like 6 hours and try to get the game so that they don't have to pay their employees for nothing.
Nice. Okay, so we're gonna, for just our meditation part, we're gonna pull a little bit from this book that I keep in my office. It's called Becoming the Bodhisattva, which, spoiler alert, is not a Jewish book. But we're flexible here for what we use before we really dive in at 10:30. But I found this, I really wanted to focus on just this passage before we do our sit that I found this morning, which says, I am not angry with my bile and other humors, fertile source of pain and suffering. So why should I resent my fellow creatures, victims too of like conditions? And then the author who's translating this text says, why is it that we don't get angry when suffering is caused by something inanimate, like an illness or a tree branch dropping on our head? When suffering is caused by our fellow human beings, we're quick to feel resentment. You don't have to have an answer to that question yet.
An observation is that people will swear when they stub their toe. There's a string of curses that comes out of many people, so I think they're angry with rage.
That's fair. That's fair. But I think it's an interesting week to think about, like, when we get mad at other people for more ordinary things. I mean, there's some real awful stuff going on in our world, and at some point people have to take responsibility for ourselves. But I get really angry in the morning when I'm driving somewhere, so I have to drive a lot for my other job. And someone will just start walking in the middle of the street. And then they'll give you that look, that wave, oh, thank you for letting me through. And I want to say to them, I didn't give you permission. I don't know what you're thanking me for. I'm not happy with you or at all. But we tend to get very angry at people. Yes, Sierra?
Earlier this week, I was angry at my student because he asked to go to the bathroom, and then instead he went to go finish a paper. I know that because after he came back after 20 minutes, he burst into the room waving it triumphantly. And I was so mad that I yelled at him. And then I thought for 2 hours on what I would do about it. And then I thought, does he need to be punished because I'm mad at him? Or does he need to be punished to learn a lesson? But it was the last day of school. And I thought there's no more lesson to be learned. And so if I like move to advance his punishment, I'm just doing it because I'm mad, not because it's going to correct his behavior in any way. But I'm actually still mad about it. I had to think about why I needed to, like the thought of like telling the principal. I was like, would that be more work for this other colleague of mine when really there's not much I can do? And he seemed pretty sad after I yelled at him. So, yeah. I guess I wanted to share anger and resentment of 10th grade children. So,
It's a really interesting point that you made. It's this whole concept between like judgment and compassion, right? And if there's all compassion, then we don't follow the rules. There's no consequences. If we have just judgment, right, and harsh judgment, probably none of us would be here. So that's how I kind of think of what she just said.
It's just really, I've been thinking a lot about anger this week. I don't know. I never am sure who actually reads like emails from the synagogue, but you might have seen that right before Shabbat, like there was an email from Eric and Janet and me, because there was this article this week about how there's this like big one LIC redevelopment thing going on, and like there basically was apparently someone spreading rumors like this whole plan was like a Zionist plan to kick Palestinians out of Long Island City. And while I happen to be very concerned about what's happening to Palestinians in Gaza, I don't really think that there's a plan to kick them out of Long Island City or Astoria. And I thought about that. It's such an anger invoking thing to like see like a lie like that, But I was trying to ask myself, like, is it wrong for me to want to like try and excuse this person's anger? Sometimes we feel like we're not supposed to excuse people for like what they do. But on the other hand, I was thinking to myself, like, what must be going on in this person's head to think that's a good idea?
I believe in fact checking.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know if I have a good answer about it. Like clearly people need to be like called out for doing those kind of things. But I also haven't we all had a feeling of what it's like to be so frustrated that like our anger just boils over into something we regret?
I think, like regarding your question, like why are we not angry at the branch but at the people? It's easier to be angry like when you can put a face on it. Like when you have someone to blame for something that you're angry about, I think it's easier because an inanimate object is not going to answer if you insult it. But I think maybe it's more satisfying to be angry at someone.
Do you think it's satisfying in the short term and the long term, or is it
Just short term.
not satisfying in the long term?
I mean, I guess it depends what kind of person you are. It could be.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, she said an inanimate object doesn't think, whereas somebody else, it's like how stupid can you be? Is essentially what you're kind of saying in your own mind. Like, how stupid are you to?
You can look for reasons
Right.
to be angry.
That's it, exactly.
My grandpa would say, like, if a mosquito bit you, you'd be mad at the mosquito, so just bite it back. But you can't do that. So it's like
Well, what do you think? What do you think he means when he says that? Since you can't really bite a mosquito back.
to get over it.
Oh, okay.
Take care of the wound and understand that it happens, but it's ultimately small. I guess unless you get malaria, which I haven't so far.
Okay. I don't know. it's anyways, I've just been thinking a lot about anger this week. I feel like there's a lot of things to be angry about. I mean, probably like in the last couple of months, there's been a lot to be angry about, but this week in particular, I was like thinking all the things that I could be angry about right now.
What's Judaism's view on anger? I've heard different. I heard there's one rabbi that's kind of a Kabbalist in Australia. It's Rabbi Leibel Wolf. He says we should never be angry, and then other rabbis say yes, anger is appropriate in certain instances. So what's your take from as a rabbi in Judaism?
Well, we haven't really done any. I haven't really taught anything about what in Judaism is called Musar literature, which is sort of like character development literature. But the basic idea of that is that no emotion or no quality is inherently good or bad. Like, it's really kind of all how you use it. So it's like if someone like has a really big tragedy and you show up, to their house, like with like you're having a really great day when you show up to their house and you show up with like a gigantic smile on your face and you want everyone to like bask in your joy and can't understand why that would be bad. Like that's happiness being used in like a bad way. Right. But I know a family whose son was killed in a robbery. Like, this is like 7 or 8 years ago, and then his death became like an internet conspiracy meme. They had to they sued like Fox News for like $100 million or something. And like these are like two. I don't know them that well, but I know them well enough to know like these two. His parents are like some of the very, very mild mannered people. But I kind of was happy that they got angry. Like it would appear that his son was killed in a robbery, which unfortunately happens from time to time. He was, that was bad enough. But then all of a sudden his murder, which will likely remain unsolved forever, became a whole other thing that had nothing to do with it. And so I was glad that they could get angry enough to like do something about it. So it wasn't inherently, there was nothing bad about being angry. But like in Sierra's example about her student, like walking out to finish his paper, it's like, well, I'm not saying it's good. It may not be good, or I don't know if it's good or bad, but it's like, it's an interesting dividing line. Like, did it make sense to, I did a little bit of classroom teaching in my life. I once had two students whose faces I didn't recognize and had already were graduating, like walk into a classroom with like a slice of pizza, like a pizza, and gave it to someone in my class. And it happened so quickly that I almost I didn't even know how to react to it. Well, it's very rude, and you certainly shouldn't be ordering like a pizza in the middle of class. Like, there's like a scene in Fast Times at Ridgemont High where the question of like, anger is also like one of these things that's like kind of a precious resource. Like, if you're using it all the time, it probably won't really be there for you when you need it, I guess you could argue that it's like that. Like, save your anger for the example of these people I know who really should use their anger in like some way. Like, there are supposed to be a lot of protests going on today around the United States, weather permitting. Some of those people would say like, I need to like have some way to express my anger. But the person who like walks in the middle of the street, maybe I can let that go. Maybe. Oriana seems skeptical about that.
Well, it is rude.
No, it is rude. It is rude. It is rude. It's
It's not the act, it's the being inconsiderate, I think.
yeah.
And I would say, in that instance with the walking across, at least they acknowledged you, they waved at you, they acknowledged
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
What I get angry at is when someone's got their head down in their phone and walk across, and now I have to stop, I have to stop the car. So in that instance, maybe there's some light at the tunnel of the person at least saying, hey, I acknowledge that you had to, like, give them a wave, you had to stop and thank you. Maybe.
Yeah. I really wish that I could just be better at not letting it linger for too long. I think that's maybe the divide. And then I want us to like do a little, let's like sit and meditate about it, or whatever is going on for you in particular. But maybe to me, it's like the lingering of the anger. That's what bothers me. It's it's that I wish that the person who does that when I'm driving somewhere, I wish that I were better at like sitting with the anger for maybe like 10 seconds and then and then moving on, because they've already moved on. Unfortunately, they've been a little bit rude, and that it probably doesn't even register that I would be annoyed about it. They don't know who I am, but like the fact that it's, that it'll last maybe 5 or 6 times as long as it should. I wish I were better at that. I would personally wish I were better at that. Okay. Let's do a little sit on that. We're going to try and sit for 15 minutes. Just close your eyes and just work on your breathing. When you feel ready, open up your eyes, or open your eyes. Hey, Liam. Ah. We're just going to take a 2-3 minute. Hello. You don't have a book? Make sure you have a blue and a red book.
See,
Right.
Last week, exam style today.
Let's read that there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. 2, 4, 6, 7. Okay. So we'll see. We're going to see if we're going to end up having a minion because actually, Olivia, this is the first thing you're going to get to help me make a minion.
Okay.
Yeah. So few more weeks. Few more weeks. Few more weeks. But either way, we got a lot to discuss because open up your Cedar Reading to page 65. I thought this morning we would we would talk about just the experience of what it means to like repeatedly say something, a prayer over and over again that doesn't feel like it's any closer to actually happening. So for those who aren't like totally every month regulars for Open Door Shabbat, the way that I do it is that we go through each part of the service each month, we rotate through, and then we start all over again. So we're all the way back at the beginning. So these are what are called the morning blessings, or like the first things people say when they come into synagogue. And you know, they're praises to God, like any other prayers are praises to God, but they're very, very specific. So one of the prayers that you say in these morning blessings, which date back like 2,000 years, is Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim, which is praise are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who releases the imprisoned. Like a Beit HaAsurin is a prison. So on a literal level, like who are we when we're saying like God releases people who are imprisoned? What are some possible examples of what that could mean? Yeah, I mean people who are enslaved. It could mean
The hostages.
yes. We're gonna come. That this is why I picked that one. This is why I picked this one for this week. It could be the hostages that are in Gaza, right? or hostages in general, right? Like the people who are. You know, you could look at it in a more metaphorical sense, right? Like, you know, people can be imprisoned from lots of things. Like people can suffer from addictions that are like kind of imprisoned. But I actually wanted to focus on what Liam was mentioning. We could, truth be told, we talk about the hostages every week because we should. But it's interesting to like say, well, so the hostages have been in Gaza for over 600 days. So that's like over 100 weeks, almost 100 weeks. And so if you're someone who prays every day and you care about the hostages, that means you're basically saying this blessing 7 days a week, which is what I do. I say this blessing every single day. And it's been 600 times. I've said this blessing like 600 times, and some of them are back. I suppose it's better than none of them being back, but there are a lot of them who are still not back. So I'm curious, like what we think about the idea of like, I'm going to say something every single day, and it doesn't, and like what happens when I say something where the meaning is like not that complicated, but it's not like it doesn't feel any closer. What do people think about that? Yeah?
Benjamin Franklin says God helps those who help themselves. So I think you can pray, but you have to take action. Praying, just praying, never.
So, and therefore what? That we shouldn't say it, or you should say it, but you should actually be doing it.
Yes, you have to do something and pray at the same time. So I think what Benjamin Franklin means when he says God help those who help themselves is that you have to take action and you have to pray at the same time, because God will help you if you do something. Being passive and not doing anything and just hoping that like God will cure all your problems, the real work doesn't help. It doesn't work. Soldiers do an operation. If there's a war right now in Iran, then yes, you can pray for God's help, but you have to do it.
Yeah, I didn't actually. I'm glad. I imagine most of you. I can't imagine it unless you've avoided the news completely over the last 48 hours. I'm sure you all saw the news like out of Israel and like what's going on in Iran. Honestly, my first reaction when I first saw like the early reports that this was happening, my first reaction was, what are going to happen to the hostages? You know, because there are some hostages who it would appear the best we are aware were alive, and then right after someone attacked something somewhere, that's when they were killed. They weren't like dead the whole time. They were killed as a response to it. So my first reaction was, oh my God, I think there's 55 remaining hostages. These 55 remaining hostages are all going to be killed. The ones that are alive. I have no idea if that's, we have no way of knowing if it's true or not, but that was my reaction. So the next morning when I get up and I pray, like, I was like very conflicted about that. Because, you know, it's sort of like I feel very limited to do anything about it. But I also like was saying a prayer, like, you know, God releases me in prison. So I think part of it is, you know, well, you know, by all means say it, but don't think that that's like sufficient. You still have to like actually do something more. What else?
That is true. I think that it's still true, and that there's so many people and time is so long, and that, but I think for me personally, it's also that I belong to God, but I don't know that I have the right to feel possessive of like God's special attention and favor, I guess, because I don't know it, but also at the same time, I think it's just like is the goal of prayer to negotiate what I want or to reaffirm what is true, even if I can't see that it goes how I think it should go. And so I think what I mean is I just remain with questions.
Understand. You know, I think I've mentioned before that the traditional version of these texts, we don't say that we adapted them in like a non-Orthodox setting. Used to have some blessings that if you still go to an Orthodox synagogue, you'll hear them say. One of them says, "Praise be you, our Lord our God, who the universe did not make me a goy," which is like just an early expression for like someone who's not Jewish. The second one is, "Praise be you, Lord our God, rule the universe, did not make me a slave." To be honest, I actually don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't really, that, you know, there's no, I think it's okay to not pray for being a slave. And the third one is, "Praise be you, Lord our God, rule the universe, did not make me a woman," which I don't think it really should be that complicated as to why we don't say that one anymore. So basically the blessings here at the top are sort of like, they were basically changed in like a positive sense of like, instead of saying like, "Praise be you, Lord our God, who didn't make me someone who isn't Jewish," "Praise be you, Lord our God, who made me Jewish." So it's flipping that. But the one about not being a slave is like actually like kind of, I don't really see anything wrong with like thanking God for not making me a slave. But let's pretend for a moment that you are a slave. Because there's a passage that I think I've taught before here around Passover that was about these collection of rabbinic questions that were asked during the Holocaust. And that there was this rabbi who was in one of the ghettos, and they were praying every day, and one of the people one day got up to pray and got to this blessing saying, you know, "Praise be your Lord our God who did not make me a slave." And he just like kind of like stops in like the middle of his prayer and is like, what is this nonsense? Like, look at what I'm having to do right now. Like I've got nothing to eat, and I can't, you know, I'm stuck in this place forever. How am I supposed to pray something that's like false, or in his eyes is false? So this, you know, this happens more than we might think. Like, what would does anyone agree with this guy? I personally think that his point is quite reasonable. So I think but does anyone disagree with the idea that you should pray something that feels maybe false to you? Say again?
Aspirational.
Okay, say more about that.
Is that you say, I mean, we say, God, you're powerful, you're beneficent, right? Gracious, and we're saying, God, be gracious. So we're saying, when you say you're not having me be a slave, but here I am, so make me free.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else?
I don't think people would say, okay,
All right, so one option is that, and this, a lot of this has to do with what you think about God, like in general, like if you, so Sierra's point, I think, is, look, like God didn't enslave you, a human being enslaved you. And there's actually a value in it because, where does the, just because you're enslaved in like a very literal sense, doesn't mean you have to allow that to affect like the freedom of your mind to be free. But I say all these things because they're very plausible like meanings to have, but it becomes more complicated when you are saying it day after day after day. I don't expect that. I don't assume that everyone here is saying these blessings every day. Maybe you are, and you haven't told me, but I don't think that most people are, right? But so when we talk about it intellectually, you say, oh, well, yeah, I mean, it can mean lots of things. That's probably true, but like, it still is something that's in the book that you're supposed to say every day. And so like, that to me, maybe I'm making too much of something, but it feels to me like something that's hard. It would be hard to say this every day if you feel like it's not getting any closer. Praise are you, Lord, our God, who clothes the naked. Some of these maybe are a little bit easier than others to say every day. Clothing the naked is sort of like a much more broad thing. And to Liam's point, it's something where like I can, if I want to not just pray, like I can go donate money. I can donate clothes to people like who need it, but I can't go and free the hostages. I can't, like one person can't do that. And so then it becomes, once it starts to get in that area, like how are you, I can't tell from the silence if like what I'm saying is just not resonating or people are not really sure what to think about it. Or yeah.
I think that, sure, like we pray, there's only so much action that we can take. But I mean, for me personally, something that I make sense out of like repetitive prayers, as you say, is that in a way they're meant to give you that strength to keep holding on and keep going. Like I think that's for me when faith comes into it, that is, I'm not just reciting something that's like meaningless, but like it's something that, as you said, maybe the conditions that we're in, we shouldn't let them break our mind. So for me, something repetitive that perhaps is meaningless if I don't have faith in it. It gives me like the strength to remain positive and say, oh, this didn't happen today, but it might happen tomorrow. So maybe the hostages aren't free today, but perhaps they will be free tomorrow. I don't know.
I mean, look, there's something really important about not giving up. I mean, what would be, it would certainly be worse for the collective Jewish people, the collective like state of Israel, just like
for people to stop, hoping that they're coming home and say, well, we're just going to like give up on that. That's certainly worse than dealing with the tension of the fact that you're hoping for something every day that doesn't feel like that's coming. And I mention all of this like in terms of our studying of it because I think that we should never underestimate how much this is one of the like big barriers to like praying in general. It's like, there's something in a prayer book that I'm supposed to say because the rabbi told me to, or because I think that God told me to, and I just can't get on board with it. The funny thing is that most things in the prayer book are so broad in their language that there's a lot of room to it's like, okay, I can finesse that in a lot of ways, but when it says like, and someone that I know is really sick, or it frees the captives and people are captive and they're not free. Like it's hard, it feels harder sometimes to finesse those things. I do think in what Oriana's saying, like there is some, and I guess this is related to what Liam said a little earlier, which was there is something to the fact that like, are these things that God did or are they things that we did? Like who's the problem here? I'll let you all decide in terms of the hostages, like who you think is most at fault for them not being free, but whomever it is a person, or a group of people. So let's keep our eye on the ball and remember that people have the responsibility to change. Can anyone think of something that's like a Jewish practice or like a Jewish prayer that you've ever like been asked to say or do that you're just sort of like, I don't really know if I believe that that's true?
I have trouble with like code. I mean, if you're saying practice or prayer, right?
Yeah, I think that could be anything.
I have trouble, I guess, with some kosher laws. Like, I really don't understand why you can't eat milk and meat together. That kind of thing. I don't know. It just feels some things like that. Just that's an example. Just feels really. Maybe it made sense 2,000 years ago, but today it's like, why? Or does it feel relevant anymore?
Yeah, I mean, and like not eating milk and meat together is just sense.
Right.
But then I get the person because okay, fine. It says don't eat a kid's mother's milk. So I may not totally buy into like the why of that, but at least I understand that that's what the rule is. But how did you get from there to I can't eat like chicken parmesan, but I can put cheese on my eggs. So it's not there's some rules really make it hard. Like I've been like helping my oldest daughter. I've been like practicing her Torah portion for her bat mitzvah in September, and she actually has the Torah portion that I think has like the most number of like individual mitzvot in the whole Torah, which is like a total coincidence. It's not the one that we picked, but it has a mitzvah in there, which is a really hard word to pronounce. It's known as shatnez. Anyone know what shatnez is? You know what it is, Shai? What? I can't hear you.
I've heard of it.
You've heard of it, but you don't know what it is. Okay, fine. What is it, Susan?
I'm like the winner in here. It's you can't mix certain kinds of you can't mix wool and linen.
You can't mix certain kinds of fabric together. Okay, so the funny thing is, like using Olivia's example, right? Like, so most people have heard of keeping kosher. Even if you're not Jewish, most people have heard, certainly in America, have heard of this idea of keeping kosher. They may not know all the rules of it, but they've heard of it. Very few people have heard of the rule, have heard of shot days. There are, like, in different parts of New York, like actual like labs where you can like take your clothes. It often comes up with suits where like wool and linen, but like where they literally will look under a microscope and be like, is there any wool or linen in this suit? And using your example, it's like, I can't even pretend to give you an answer for why that's a rule. Like I can't, at least with milk and meat, I can be like, well, symbolically, it seems a little strange to like eat the thing that comes naturally from the animal, but you also killed the animal, and these people probably raised these animals. So I can sort of get that. But then the chicken parmesan thing doesn't make any sense to me. And then I really don't understand the shotness thing. So like, what's gonna happen if I like wear wool and linen? Am I gonna like die? It's like a bolt of lightning gonna come and kill me. Like it's weird. It's strange. And there are rules like that. Shotness is my favorite one, just because it's one that you may have not ever heard of at some point. I know, Sean, you've heard of it. You said you didn't know what it was. Okay, yes, Olivia. I thought you were about to say something. I thought some. Sorry, Liam was bringing something.
I think also, like growing up in Israel, it just gets mixed. I think it's just your mindset is completely. Basically, if you grew up in Israel, you just eat a dairy sandwich or you have a meat sandwich. I don't think you ever get terms. Like, when are you really going to put cheese on top of my meat? Because it's just two separate things. And I think in America, it's kind of like pursuit of happiness. I want my cheese and my turkey and my bacon. It's all like on top of it. So I think it's maybe a bigger challenge here to start, saying I can't have this with this, but there's no rules here. Basically, you can do whatever you want. Pursuit of happiness.
Fair enough. Yeah. I mean, look, it's also different when you're talking about something that you do or don't do versus something you say or don't say. I mean, this is where, like, the answer I give people, like, you say, like, why keep kosher? The answer I usually would give people is to say, look, every religion, tries to like give you ways to be mindful in your daily actions, and this is just a way. These are the rules that were set down on how to like eat mindfully. Now, does it mean that everything is like? Is it better than eating another way? Like, is it better than like saying, "Oh, I'm a vegan or a pescatarian," or if any of you have ever seen the show Silicon Valley, a pescatarian, things where you can like list all obscure food preferences. So like, I'll eat fish, but I'll only eat fish that eat other fish. But like, at least I can say for kashrut, it's like, yeah, like it means that like everywhere you're going and everywhere you're eating something and buying something, you're like stopping to like ask, is this kosher before I eat it? But that's different than like saying something every day and being like, I want this thing to happen, and it's just not happening. I use and I think it's good to like live with to be okay, like pointing out that this is like a problem. Because if I give you some like silly, if I give you some rationale why it shouldn't feel like a problem, then it just means you would never take it seriously. Like you would just completely reject it out of hand. Today I use the hostages as an example, but pray for people who are sick to be made better, and people don't always get better. And in my day job, like sometimes I'll go, sometimes I'll get called to a hospital, and I'll be with a family that I'm talking about organ donation, Jewish family, and I'll ask them if they wouldn't mind giving me their child's Hebrew name or their adult's Hebrew name, because I have a shul. I'll add the name. It's not an unfair question. I say, well, there's nothing wrong with like, it's good to be realistic, but maybe I just want them not to feel too much pain with the time that they have left. Like maybe healing them doesn't necessarily have to mean they're going to come back to life. Maybe it's just I want them to die with this, and I don't know what it feels like to be them, but I want them to die and not feel excruciating pain every single millisecond that remains. Like maybe that's the best I can hope for. Maybe that's the best I can hope for.